Famous Faces and Funnies in Melbourne, Florida is leading the way in pop culture fun. From comic books and graphic novels to Funko Pops and collector's items, Famous Faces and Funnies has it all. Rick Shea and the professional team at Famous Faces and Funnies are friendly and knowledgeable. Whether you're looking for toys, props, collector treasures, or a new comic book, Famous Faces and Funnies is your one-stop shop. To find Famous Faces and Funnies on Facebook and Twitter, just type at FFF Comics.
Hey there, friends and foes. This is John Pica, the prophet of pop culture. I'm the host of the Back of the Cereal Box podcast, but right now you are watching and listening to one of the best shows on the internet. Ooh, yeah, Reels and Heels. Dig it!
Hey, welcome once again live here on Reels and Heels on an interesting Saturday. It started out with a bit of clouds and some rain, and now the sun's going through, so hopefully it doesn't rain anymore today. And Nicole will be joining us here in a minute, but today we have a very interesting guest who dabbles in a little bit of everything. Joshua, how are you doing, my friend?
I am doing very well. It's good to be here. Like you said, yeah, it was a little cloudy today, but now the sun is shining pretty brightly here in Florida.
Oh, yes. And as us, we are wrestling fans. So this is the eve of AEW Double or Nothing, which happens live tomorrow in Las Vegas. We're excited for that pay-per-view. Headlined by the AEW World Title match, CM Punk versus Adam Page. Should be a great thing. AEW puts on some very, very good pay-per-views. I think that's why they do them 4 times a year instead of like WWE, who does them like every month. So,
right.
Yeah. So you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Let us know, who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. So I am Joshua Caleb. I had recently graduated law school, and I will be going into intellectual property and mergers and acquisitions. In the midst of the bar studies, getting ready to take that in July. And then I also do work with the Atlas Society, which is actually how we met, where there are different comic books and things that the Atlas Society produces. And so I'll go to different events as a representative for Atlas Society, which is a nonprofit organization, and spread the word about the comic books and all the great stuff we've got coming down the pipeline.
Yeah. So for those that are not familiar, what is the Atlas Society?
So the Atlas Society, people might not be as familiar with the name, but you might be more familiar with someone by the name of Ayn Rand. She's an author, she's a screenplay writer, and she's a philosopher who wrote a series of films and books. And the Atlas Society's mission is to, just bring lots of the great content that are present in her works to a new generation. We do that through comic books, and we do that through animated films as well as other mediums.
That's really cool. And, we had a great discussion there at Suncoast. You and Nicole were talking about, because she does the comics in the classroom, and you loved that idea. But you're a component of, classroom. You have what your dad, you said, is in Orange County for the board there?
Yeah, so my dad, Dementio Barton, he's currently running for the chair of the school board here in Orange County.
Yes. So, you were all about, anything to do with the classroom. And when you found out it was comics, you're like, that's really cool. And Absolutely. Then, we sat there. It was a good 30-minute conversation, I think.
Yep. Oh yeah, just it's great, when you get to meet like-minded people. I think that there's a lot of content that kids, need to be introduced to. But it's cool when you get to have a medium that they'll be more open to, as far as using the comic book to, start conversations like Nicole was saying, and to, introduce them to new ideas and things like this in through a medium that's not as boring sometimes as
Right.
just a straight book might be at times.
Yeah. And the conversation you guys were talking about, like everything that they teach and everything we see on the news and learn about in the real world are there in the comics, and they've been there for years.
Mhm.
And it's like, why not just use the comics as a stepping stone to those grander novels and stuff.
Absolutely, exactly. And there are multiple lessons that can be learned from different comic books. One of the I'm sure you already know this, but one of the most popular characters as far as superheroes are concerned is Spider-Man. And a common theme that both I obtained from reading the Spider-Man comics, but also when I talk to others who really like those comics, is just the willingness to continue moving forward even when there are a lot of obstacles in your way. I think Spider-Man was a unique hero in the sense that everything did not go his way, to put it mildly.
Right.
And even with that, he had to still continue to do what was right and move forward and to grow and learn and still strive to live up to his potential and take on the responsibility that came with his power. And so I think lessons like that are little gems that are throughout comic books, and so it's great to be able to spread that to the next generation.
Right. And then, when Stan Lee created Spider-Man, uh, he said anybody could be behind a mask. And I mean, it could be white, black, female, I mean, anybody. And that was something that resonated with everyone
Mhm.
because you didn't see, I mean, you knew Peter Parker, but when it was Spider-Man, it was like you can imagine, it could be me behind the mask.
Right.
But now we have these characters that are, like Miles Morales.
Mhm.
And then we have Miss Marvel, who's Pakistani, which her show comes out in, I think, about a week or so on
Right,
Disney.
on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we're starting to see a lot of diversity in comics too. That's really great.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
let's hop in the time machine here and go back to younger Joshua. What were some of your fandoms, growing up?
So growing up, my dad introduced me to superheroes and comics and like the whole shebang. There were many times we would go to the library and we would actually rent X-Men the animated series, Spider-Man the animated series, and these most of these were done by the time I was really starting into watching these shows. But they were still just as great as ever, and so that's how I got my introduction, to it. I even just mentioning X-Men the animated series, I have the theme song playing in my
I
mind.
know. I was just yeah.
And it's classic, it's a classic theme song. But yeah, I really enjoyed it though. I mean, it was just really just well done storytelling. Had engaging characters, really cool villains. There were, plenty in X-Men, it handled some really interesting topics that are like extremely relevant. Then, with Spider-Man, there's just, everything was just very well done as far as the story, the plot, the characters, the great battles and
Right.
action scenes. So that's what really started me uh, as far as my interest into comic books. The animated shows came first, and then after that came an interest in comics.
Yeah. So, you mentioned Spider-Man the animated series and X-Men. Those two, along with Batman the animated series, are like
Mhm.
the go-to cartoons for the comic book fans. Those are like the like those are the Mount Rushmore of superhero cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a fun fact: if you did not know, the person who did the X-Men theme also created the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers theme song.
Wow, like the OG Mighty
Yes.
Morphin Power Rangers.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. And he may be back for the reboot that they're doing, X-Men 97 on Disney Plus, which I think comes out next year. It's a continuation of that X-Men show, so it'd be nice to hear his music again. I mean, I guess it's not spoilish. Doctor Strange has been out for a couple weeks, so there's a scene in there where Professor X, which we see in the trailers, so it's not a spoiler. You hear that theme song for just a second, and it was like really good.
That's awesome. Yeah, I haven't been able to see it as of yet, just with bar studies and, and whatnot. But that's awesome.
That is awesome. So besides like comic books and reading and all that, what other things were you into as a child?
So when I was really young, when I was maybe before I turned 8 years old, I actually wanted to be an astronaut. That was really what I wanted to do. My dad, he's a scientist and an engineer, and so he told me, hey, if you want to become an astronaut, you can do that. You're just going to have to really get into science and math and all that good stuff. And so when I was young, that's what I did. I was very, very into it. I went and did different science competitions and all of these really cool things that you can do when you're with as far as different opportunities they have for young people to enter in the sciences and stuff like that. But long story short, I actually got an opportunity. I started homeschooling in my 3rd grade year, and my mom and dad, they're like, okay, this is the first time ever homeschooling anybody, right? And they're like, all right, we really need some incentive to help ensure all the work gets done. And so what they said was, if I went the entire school year and made straight A's, that they would take me to Kennedy Space Center. And so, so they did not make it easy on me, but I did make straight A's, and we went to Kennedy Space Center. I got to speak with an astronaut while I was there. And long story short, I could go on, but just to kind of keep it brief, I ended up getting an opportunity to be part of a program that they were doing at NASA, and they were taking certain youth and putting them together for this as a team for this mission in like 15 years that they were planning. And so basically I had the opportunity to be an astronaut in a decade and a half right in front of me when I was like 7 years old. And so my dad at that time, he was working as an engineer at a firm in Tampa, Florida. And he basically was willing to move the entire family so that I could have this opportunity, because we'd have to relocate over to where the base was. And anyway, I was excited about it. My dad was excited about it. He was open to it. My mom wasn't as excited. The reason being was because when she heard about all the danger factors, like they're very upfront with you when they're doing all the interviews and stuff as part of this process. They're like, this is a survival, things that could go wrong, blah, 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 blah. Like they tell you a lot of stuff up front. And my mom was not liking the idea of it. I remember one time it was late, and I would like peek the door open to my bedroom, and I could see my mom and dad in the living room, and they're debating over this whole thing, and my mom is like, I'm not having my baby dying in outer space where I can't hold him, and my dad's like, but honey, opportunity, and but anyway, long story short, I ended up not accepting that opportunity once I realized that these space ventures could take anywhere from 5 to 7 years at a time. And so I knew that I wanted to have I was 7 years old, but I knew I wanted to have a family in the future and have kids and things like this. And so I couldn't imagine being away for these periods of time. So I said no. And for a little while, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But when on my 12th birthday, had a conversation with my dad, and we looked at different gifts and skills that I had been developing, and like a list of careers that those skills could relate to and excel in. And of the careers, the one I chose was the film career. And so I wanted to do movie production from the time I was starting at 12 years old. I wanted to do movie production. And so that became my drumbeat. I went and I got certified in multiple multimedia fields. I'm a certified expert in Adobe Photoshop and Premiere, graphic design, 3D animation. I have professional certifications, a list of industry standard programs. Started a small production company, Manifested Visions, and ran that for about 7 years. I've gotten to work on films all across the state of Florida. I've gotten to walk a few red carpets in Hollywood. Just got to do like a lot of just really, really amazing things as far as the film is concerned. Now, when I graduated high school, I was I was still homeschooled at that time, and there was like this big homeschool graduation that happens. It's actually happening right now in Orlando. But anyway, there was this guy who was speaking there, and he mentioned this political training program that they do in Texas. He was a Texas state representative. And my dad's like, "Hey, you should apply for that." And so they have thousands of applicants every year. They only accept 100, and of that, 25 is for alumni. But anyway, I applied. I got in, got to learn the political process, really enjoyed it. And when I came back from that, in addition to my pre-existing love for film, I also now had a love for law. And so I came back with both of these, and I was like, all right, where can I kind of find, like, where can these things kind of mesh together? And that's how I got to IP law. So intellectual property with, copyrights, trademarks, patents. That's kind of like the sweet spot for both the law and, my like for film and all these different characters and comic stories and stuff where it all kind of combines.
That's really cool. And can you go a little bit more into detail about entertainment law, of what you've learned so far going through the bar and stuff? I'm sure it's a very hard process compared to, like divorce lawyers and like civil rights lawyers and all that stuff.
Right. So every area of law has its own, unique factors, different, breadth of things that you have to learn. It is nice that with IP, most of IP is at a federal level, and that's that, it's created at a federal level so that it can be consistent throughout the states. So that's really awesome. Because I haven't taken the bar yet, there's like a limit to what I can say as far as the law is concerned. But there are a lot of beneficial things that come just from understanding the field, especially if this is the field that you want to go into. Every single major company has an army of lawyers, and not just for personal injury or something, but specifically to protect their intellectual property. Because when you're talking about films, when you're talking about comic books, and now the same companies who are making the comics also are making the film, right? So they're kind of one and the same a lot of times these days. But when you're talking about these sort of mediums, copyright, trademark is everything. That is the bread and butter. If you do not own your trademarks, if you do not own your copyrights, you really don't have anything in these industries. And so it's all a matter of copyright and trademark law. And so, one thing for sure is that it's great to stay abreast of these things, and also have people, have a lawyer, people who you trust, who you can go to and get wisdom on, how to manage this field when it comes to intellectual property.
Yeah. And, speaking of that, because this is kind of in the news right now, Winnie the Pooh is in the public domain.
Yes.
So they're making a horror movie.
Yep.
Yes. Well, technically, Disney never really owned Winnie the Pooh, I guess, because it was a book before it was even a Disney property. But I know, like, next year, I think Mickey Mouse is supposed to go into the public domain, but I guess Mickey Mouse for many years was supposed to go into public domain, and I guess Disney somehow found a way, because Disney has the money and knows everyone, that they keep extending that. So I'm guessing next year Mickey Mouse is not going into the public domain.
Well, I think it's unlikely that we're going to see another extension past the current time period, as far as how long these last. I would be surprised if there is another extension to the copyright law. I would be very surprised. My if I had to just take a guess, I would say that there's probably not going to be another extension anytime soon. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are lobbyists, if you will, trying to get an extension to happen. Um, I think that I think it's healthy to have things come into the public domain, because you allow new people with fresh ideas and fresh perspectives, to have fresh takes on these characters. And so, even looking at Disney, for example, most of their biggest intellectual property, especially in the beginning, the stuff that's responsible for Disney being Disney, was almost all public domain copyrights. Hello.
Hi.
And so it was all public domain content, intellectual property that had fallen into the public domain. And so they're able to use that and create great stories with it, right? That many of us grew up with and show our kids, And so that opportunity for there to be, new things that come in, so that we can have that breath of life, be breathed in. I think it's a benefit. Because imagine if there was no Disney. Imagine if Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast and all of these things were stuck in copyright and never fell into the public domain. The entire world would literally be different right now, right? And so, in the same way, there are entire worlds, if you will, that we'll never experience until certain things come into the public domain, because there'll be new ideas and new Disneys, if you will, that will be able to make great stories and great comics and films based off of new material.
Yeah, and in the public domain, there are a lot of known characters. I think like Tarzan is one of the characters that's in public domain. Mm-hmm. John Carter, from that book series, that Disney movie, yeah, mm-hmm. Is another public domain character. There's a lot of well-known novels that are in the public domain. That's why you can see like Frankenstein be done by like multiple studios, or Dracula done by multiple studios, as long as it's not the universal versions of the characters.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So another kind of big lawsuit in the entertainment world is the Friday the 13th lawsuit. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I am not familiar with that off the top of my head.
Okay, so Sean Cunningham and Victor Miller. Victor Miller came in and was hired to write the script of Friday the 13th. And so there was a long-standing thing about who owned Friday the 13th. And I guess back then there was this thing called work for hire. Mm-hmm. And so if you can kind of explain what like work for hire means, and I'll send you some information about the Friday the 13th lawsuit and stuff. But from what I can gather is that Victor Miller is claiming that like Friday the 13th is his, like he owns it. And then Sean Cunningham is like, I funded it, I'm the producer and all that. And so there was a battle where then like they couldn't make anything. It was kind of stuck. So like there was a video game that they had to stop doing DLCs for and all that because of the lawsuit. So if you want to explain like work for hire and all that, so people can kind of understand what that means.
Absolutely. So work for hire is a legal concept that basically states when work is created pursuant to or within the scope of employment, then that intellectual property is going to belong to the employer unless there is an agreement stating otherwise. So if Disney hires me to write comic books and they say, "Hey, we need a new character, write a character," and I come up with a new character pursuant to what they've asked me to do within the scope of my employment, they're going to own that character automatically, unless I have an agreement with Disney stating otherwise. In the same way, if let's take George Lucas. As we all know, George Lucas actually created new inventions and different tools of the trade in order to produce Star Wars and some of the effects that were in Star Wars that, before that time had never been seen in a film before because they didn't exist. The capacity didn't exist. Well, if let's say George Lucas had somebody on his team and was like, "Hey, we need X done, figure out how to do X," right? If that person is an employee of George Lucas's company at that time and they created, this newfangled way of filming or doing or having a special effect, George Lucas's company would own that in the exact same way. Now that would be an example of a patent, right? A new invention as opposed to a copyright, which would be a new character for a new story. But the same rule would apply. So basically, unless there is an agreement to the contrary, if you come up with intellectual property within the scope of your employment, then that would count. Now, if I work for Disney but on my own time, I decide to make a character, on the side. It's not on company time. I'm not, being paid by the company to do this. I'm just kind of, in my room just doodling some stuff, right? Well, that's different, and I'd have a pretty good argument that was outside of the scope of my employment. But yeah, that's the gist of the legal doctrine.
That this is interesting because I like I said, I'm a huge film fan, and like knowing about how the law side of, because people think the movies are just like directors and producers and actors, but no, the studios are carpenters and craft makers, and like even to like the cooks and stuff, the catering, and they have legal departments for everything. So that's why at the end of a movie you see it says this film was made by like 15,000 people. It really was made by 15,000 people. Another thing I want to touch on about this is piracy has been a huge thing since
forever,
like the 90s, like Napster and stuff like that. Well, I'm sure it's been around longer than that, but like with music, Napster and LimeWire and BearShare and all these different forms of things started sharing films and music and stuff. So you want to talk about, if you know a little bit about like that piracy and how the music industry and the film industry is working together to fight it?
So it's a nuance. The answer is kind of nuanced to that. Different companies may take slightly different approaches. There's to some extent, a company has to ask itself, okay, first off, what is the law on this matter? And when we're clearly in the right because they're, pirating our music, let's say, it's like, okay, well, what's the cost of going after them? What's the likeliness that going after any given person will prevent other people from following their path of piracy? And then also, how much are we actually preventing with any individual action, right? And so you might see companies will generally go after people who they think are, really, really causing some damage either to the brand or, to the company's bottom line, or they'll go after more like distribution centers if they can take out a website as opposed to taking out just somebody who's posting on the website. right? They would rather, take out a website that's dedicated to piracy as opposed to just any individual pirateer, if you will. And so, the different companies have different ways of doing things. When you talk about comic books and characters along these lines, you see a lot of people don't realize that, with copyright law, you can't just make copies of characters and sell them for pecuniary gain, right? So, there are a lot of things which happen even at comic book conventions, which, if the companies wanted to, they could stop a lot of stuff that's going on, even at comic book conventions where different characters, different copyrighted characters are being drawn and sold on varying merchandise. But there are all of these factors, right? On one hand, it's okay. Does this, is it worth it? It has to be worth it for the company to go after somebody, right? So either they have to be, really affecting the bottom line or affecting the brand, or in some way by going after this person, you can really potentially stop other people from following suit. That's really, things like that. And then also public image, right? If Disney was going out and throwing the full massive weight of their army of lawyers against every 15-year-old who sells a Mickey Mouse picture, right? Public image on Disney would go down really quickly, right? And so, so things like this have to be considered, even though legally Disney would be able to do that by law. They legally have the ability to do that because, the 15-year-old who draws the Mickey Mouse picture and selling it, is actually selling copyrighted material, and so they're violating, Disney's rights by doing that. But yeah, it's like a multifaceted evaluation that companies have to go through.
Yeah, this is very interesting. Is there something you wanna ask that you're curious about?
No, I just kind of trying to absorb.
And
wow, let's not do it.
And on this note, right, like Atlas Society, for example, there are obviously there's intellectual property related to taking books that already exist and then creating a comic book based on a work of art that's already existing and copyrighted, right? And so what we've had to do with Atlas Society is we'll either wait for something to fall into the public domain, and some of these books were written long ago enough where some of them are falling into the public domain, or we have to otherwise acquire the rights to to make the comic books or things like this. And so that's something that even with Atlas Society, because we try to stay in the wheelhouse of things that that Ayn Rand is either made or different or produced or things like this, regardless of what medium she produced it in. And just having to be aware of, okay, who has the rights first off, because sometimes that's not easy to answer. And then how do we go about legally attaining the rights, or is it public domain? These are things that we have to look at before we make any comic book, since they're based on pre-existing stories, right?
So when you talk about when you have to figure out who owns the rights, sometimes there's properties that the rights are spread out through multiple companies. So who has the legal right to say I own this? So one company owns 15% or another company owns 10%. Is that how they base on who has the more ownership over the character or character?
So there are different rights. So think of rights in any piece of intellectual property as a bundle of sticks. Okay, so you've got the bundle of sticks, and all of the sticks together equal the right that you have inside of this particular property, right? But each stick is a different aspect of that right. So you might have the right to, for example, you might have given Universal the right to make a movie about your Harry Potter books, but you didn't give Universal the other stick that was the right to make money off of a ride. And so you are still going to make all of the money off of the roller coasters for Harry Potter and off of the Harry Potter world and all of this stuff. because you still have that right. So they have to pay you in order to license that from you, right? And have the ability to use your characters to make the ride, because they don't have that right. You only gave them, you know, the right to make a film or the right to make toys, right? And so each stick in the bundle is a different type of right, and you can pass that out to whoever you wish. You can take any given stick and cut it into pieces and then hand pieces together to different people. And the way that it would work is, if you did do that, the majority stick rules, if you get what I'm saying, right? So let's say I take the stick for making movies for Harry Potter and I give it to 3 different people, right? I cut it into 3 pieces and give it to 3 people. Well, if it's 3 equal pieces, so everybody has 33% ownership, well, then all I need is a vote of 2 in order to make the movie about Harry Potter, right? 2 people need to agree. It doesn't matter if the other one's crying bloody murder. As long as 2 of them agree, that's 66% ownership, and I can make whatever movie I want to with their agreement, right? And so, so it's kind of a majority rule type of thing, unless, again, if you want to contract otherwise, you generally can contract otherwise. But this is, again, why, you know, whenever anyone's making these sort of judgments or anything, you always go to a lawyer, because a lawyer can tell you the specifics, how to handle whatever your specific situation is. But as far as just, you know, basics about what the law itself says, you know, it's treated like a bundle of sticks, and each individual stick is like a, you know, a different aspect of the right. And so, like with Atlas Society, if we're looking for, you know, who has the copyrights who has the sticks that are necessary to be able to make a comic book, that's all we're looking for. Someone else, as a hypothetical, could have the stick for making a movie, but we're not trying to make the movie, unless we are, in which case we have to go for that stick as well. But that's how it works. And then once you find who has the pieces of the stick, all you need is a majority of that stick. Usually, again, unless, you know, there's a contract to contract, all you need is a majority of that stick in order to be able to do what you want to do.
So it's like the Atlas Society was like the perfect fit for you to be a part of, because you love comics and film and stuff. And David Kelly, who is married to Michelle Pfeiffer, is part of. He was one of the founders of the Atlas Society, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's been great being involved with the Atlas Society. Jennifer A. Grossman, who is our CEO, she's awesome, and you know, she's really had a focus on taking Ayn Rand's work and, you know, just reaching a new generation with it. Not everybody's going to pick up, you know, a 300-page book and just start reading, especially when we're talking about younger people, right? You know, most of them, in fact, I think it's safe to say most of them will, you know, just pick up the 300-page book or 500-page book and start reading. So it's nice to be able to, you know, put this in mediums that are accessible, and then also just it's really cool seeing just a little bit of the behind the scenes as far as the intellectual property and, you know, the different process that it takes in order to be able to do everything above board, you know, where we don't have to worry about, you know, anybody coming after us because they have the stick and we didn't have rights, you know. So yeah, it's been great just, you know, kind of seeing little glimpses of that.
Yeah, and you know, we're seeing that with Marvel, because Stan Lee, who was like, this was, I want to say, late 70s, early 80s, they were about to go bankrupt. Mm-hmm. So Marvel was spread out. You know, the Hulk, of course, went with Universal. Spider-Man was at Fox for a little bit. Well, actually, Spider-Man was with James Cameron. And then he didn't make anything, so it was up for sale again. And then Sony ended up, of course, owning Spider-Man. And then the X-Men characters X-Men went to Fox. And then we saw that when the MCU first started, they were at Paramount. And then, of course, Disney bought Marvel. And And then after their agreement with Paramount, Disney started producing the Marvel films themselves, and they started buying back their Marvel characters. I guess the biggest acquisition was buying Fox for $74 billion, which got them all the X-Men characters, which is like 900 plus characters. And of course, The Simpsons and many other Fox properties, Avatar. And they own the Hulk. They just don't own the distribution
right.
Yeah, right. So Universal still owns the right. So Disney can make a Hulk movie, but Universal gets to distribute it to the theaters, and Disney's not going to want to do that.
Right. Yeah, I think the Marvel acquisition was a stroke of brilliance.
Yeah, and that was for $4 billion, and within the first like 2 years they got that money back. And then of course in 2012 they bought Lucasfilm for $4 billion, and within the first couple of years they got that back very quick.
Yes.
People are like, Disney's going to buy everything. After that Fox acquisition, they're not in the position to buy anybody right now. I mean, $74 freaking billion. I mean, that's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. That is for sure.
And that's not including any debt that Fox owned, so. And then the most recent acquisition was Discovery, of all people, buying Warner Media from AT&T. And that was for like $43 billion.
It's like a little Pac-Man game.
Yeah, and I mean, as you can see, though, Discovery, I think, is a very good company. David Zaslav, who owns Discovery, who's the CEO, he lets all of his creatives do like what they're meant to do, is be creative. He doesn't mingle in, like, say, Food Network. He lets the Food Network people do the Food Network thing. He lets Home and Garden do their thing. He lets the Discovery Channel do their thing. He has the final say, but he's like, I'm going to get the people that know about cooking to run the cooking stuff.
Right.
And so he's already
brilliant.
Yeah, and he's doing that with Warner Media. Like, we saw people at Warner Brothers, since AT&T had bought them, and they just took a studio that was a prestige studio and ran it into the ground. So I think we're going to see Warner Brothers slowly become that prestigious studio that it's been, because it's one of the oldest studios in Hollywood. The only one older is Universal.
Wow.
Yeah. So right now he's looking for someone to run the DC stuff. He made a statement saying that there's a lot of characters like Superman that's kind of sidelined within the film world, and there's other characters that we're starting to see now that are not just, say Superman or Batman. Because that's, through our lifetime, that's mostly what we got, right? Superman and Batman. So now we're seeing Shazam, and we're seeing Aquaman and Wonder Woman, and Black Adam now is coming out. Flash, maybe. The Ezra Miller stuff is, but.
Yeah. Which reminds me of the Amber Heard stuff. It's like, we'll keep Amber, but we'll get rid of, we'll keep Ezra, but we'll get rid of it's just like, okay, so let me get this straight. Ezra stays, Depp goes, and maybe Heard is still there, but it's oh man.
So let me ask you this then, since this is kind of your field. When you have a movie like The Flash, which is done, it's in the can, and you have a situation with Ezra Miller where, like, he's in the news, it seems like every day. I don't know why Hawaii lets him stay there, but whatever. People are saying they should just recast and stuff, but people don't understand how expensive that would be when they've already spent over like $100 million for this film. So where does that put a studio? Because I mean, lawyers are involved in something like this. Where does that put the studio then in their thinking of what they do with a situation like this?
Well, I think that a lot of studios, their first thing is, okay, risk reward analysis. That's going to be the very first thing. It's like, okay, if we do nothing, right, which also happens to save us the most money, what will be the drawbacks from it? If most people, like, you know about this, I know about this, right? But there are a lot of just everyday moviegoers. They haven't read a single comic book. They don't look at any of the news articles about things. They might have. There are a lot of people who have no idea that Ezra Miller has done anything. And so if the large base of moviegoers aren't really going to be affected by this because they don't really know about it, then one decision might be in order on the part of the company. Whereas if they feel that the majority of moviegoers, this might actually affect their bottom line, then that's going to be different. I think that a lot of times, people like us, because we're actually involved and we keep our ear to the ground on stuff like this. We can hear what's going on. We know what's going on, and in some ways we're kind of inundated with what's going on. But whether it be on Twitter or we see the articles shared and things like this, but people on the outside world, I mean, as loud as a Twitter scream is, they don't hear it. And there are millions and millions of people who don't hear it. And so if the company, feels as though it's not really going to hurt their bottom line, then one decision might be in order. And if they feel it will hurt their bottom line, another decision might be in order.
Yeah, the whole, like, Ezra Miller and then of course Johnny Depp and Amber Heard thing, which I mean, I'm not going to take away from Ezra Miller as an actor. He's a phenomenal actor. The same thing with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. I think they're both great actors. But and then there's other things, of course. Recently with Kevin Spacey, more accusations from the UK came out against him this past week. But I'm not going to take away from he's an Academy Award winning actor. So, some people kind of can't blur the line, like the performer from like the individual. So I don't know your personal stance on that with people, like if things happen, do you be like, I don't know if I can watch their movies or listen to their music again or anything like that? Like, how do you feel, like, personally?
So for me, it depends on what they do. I think that for the most part, if somebody just says something I disagree with, I really don't care. As long as they're good at their craft, I enjoy. In this case, we're talking about movies and actors. So as long as they can act, right, and they're good at their craft, I mean, I really don't care that they said something that that I disagree with, even if I fervently disagree with it. I think as Americans, I mean, we should, be able to, okay, yeah, we got our disagreements, but hey, also we both like Flash, or we both like Aquaman or whatever the character or movie or whatever it may be. But I think there are some things that people can do that are egregious enough to where, it goes beyond just a simple disagreement. It's like, okay, this is the type of person who I wouldn't want to fund, if you will, right? And if it gets to that point, then my personal thing is, okay, I'll be willing to sacrifice, as much as I like this person's acting or their films. I'll be willing to sacrifice a little bit of entertainment or get my entertainment from other means in order to not fund somebody who I think has really crossed the line, right? Like, and I'm sure we could both just kind of imagine a list of really egregious crimes that if somebody did these things, we would not want to put money in their pockets, right? But aside from that, aside from like actually doing something that's just really wrong, if somebody's just saying a viewpoint that I disagree with, my thing is just live and let live. As long as you're good, as long as you're good at your craft, I'm not gonna.
I mean, me personally, like I still appreciate Kevin Spacey's work.
Mm-hmm.
I also believe, people are innocent until proven guilty.
Yes.
But we live in a society where it's pretty much you're guilty until proven innocent.
But that's not even the case. You're guilty in the court of public opinion, because enough people come out and say that you've done something. That's good enough for most people.
And that's sad, because our republic wouldn't stand. Every time we say the Pledge of Allegiance and we pledge allegiance, to the republic for which it stands, it wouldn't stand if we have this, if our court system becomes infected with this whole guilty until proven innocent, or if enough people say something, then I'm just going to believe it, or because sadly there are people who are willing to lie. And I feel like sometimes we forget this, and we all know that, there are people who are willing to lie about even serious things, serious issues, but I do agree with what you said as far as, innocent until proven guilty. I think that one thing that I've noticed just with recent things that have happened and different scandals, bless you, or supposed scandals, is that it's always best to wait until more information comes out before you drop your hammer of judgment. Like take the Johnny Depp stuff, for example. If you made your judgment right off the bat the moment you saw the first Amber Heard article, right, you could have been in a position where, had you waited, right, and waited till more information, more evidence come out, you would have had a totally different outlook on your judgment. There's a saying. It goes something like, the first person to speak always seems right until they are cross-examined. And so, that saying really holds true. Mm-hmm. And so, I think it'd be great if more people realize that for sure.
Yeah. When it comes to those two, I have an opinion, which I think they were toxic for each other. Yeah. And I think the stories that they're both sharing are true, if that makes sense. Like, what Johnny Depp has said and what Amber Heard has said, I think both accounts are true. I just think that they just weren't right. They were toxic for each other. Does that make them bad human beings? I don't think so. I mean, it's just part of life, right? There's some people that are meant for each other, and then there's some people that are not. I
think it's interesting to me that, Johnny Depp left, his wife, with whom he had multiple kids, for Amber Heard, and then all of this stuff happens in that relationship. It feels a little like karma. It feels a little bit like karma. Maybe there's a lesson there. When you marry a woman, stay with her. Stay with a good woman. Don't leave her for somebody else.
Could have been so much worse. Like I just the whole thing is just like a case in understanding that, we spend a lot of time glorifying these people, and then we realize they have the same kinds of problems the rest of us.
I agree 100%. Mm-hmm. I think that is the lesson to learn. I think that's the number one lesson to learn from all of this. Yeah. Whether it's the Ezra Miller stuff, whether it's the Harvey Weinstein stuff, I think that what you just said is the most important lesson, that if nobody learns anything else, that should be the lesson that they take away from These people are not, the paragons of virtue, beaming down moral from above and on high, lecturing us. I think that, it's good to realize, okay, these are flawed people. And in some cases, they're so privileged that their flaws have been protected and allowed to grow.
Yeah.
And, and they've become, and some of them have become extremely flawed people. And it's good to realize that so that we have a more realistic view of them, and just kind of see them as they are, not less than, not and also not with the starry-eyed greater than, but just see them as they are.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll bring up on this type of stuff is there's only one person, well, maybe two, that I'll never forgive, and the number one person is Chris Brown. I can never forgive him because there's video of what he did to Rihanna, and I can never forgive him for that. As a man, you never do that to a woman.
Amen.
But I just gotta say something. You're speaking of lecture and stuff. I could totally have you do an audiobook. Like, you have that type of voice. Like, I could see you like doing an audiobook and like going into characters and stuff. You have that James Earl Jones, like stature of a voice there.
I feel like if you're gonna give in entertainment law, there's probably not a jury, but if you had to give a deposition in front of a group of people, they'd be very interested in what you had to say next because they'd want to keep listening.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So, we've learned a lot about entertainment law, which is really cool. I want to kind of dive into the Atlas Society a little bit more. They have a philosophy. If you want to kind of explain that and how you got involved with them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So the philosophy is based around individualism. And that is, the desire and the ability to think for yourself, to be free and come to your own conclusions in life, for you to, seek out the betterment of yourself and to learn and to grow as an individual, and also to be objective and to, see reality for what it really is, to live as an individual for yourself, and really enjoy freedom, protect freedom, and guard your mind and intellect. And that's as a broad nutshell view. That would be what what Atlas Society is all about.
And how did you get involved?
Yeah, so I got involved a while back. There is a convention that I went to years ago while I was still in undergrad. And I met Jennifer Grossman, who is the CEO of Atlas Society. I met her at the event, and we started talking. We had a really great conversation, and from there, at that time I was telling her about my plans to go to law school. Now I've graduated law school, but, so we just really hit it off and had a great conversation. And I've had the distinct honor of traveling with Atlas Society and doing different events in different states, and including the event that I met you at and Suncoast Comic Con. And so yeah, it was really just a great conversation starting off, and then just being able to build a relationship and just do some awesome things over the years.
That's really cool. Have you had a chance to meet David Kelly?
I have. So there was actually an event that took place last year. Let me put it this way. I had a chance, but I was not able to really, have going to a really great conversation or anything like that. There was actually an event where I know I would have been able to directly meet him, but just with law school and everything like that, it's hampered certain chances that I, otherwise will be able to take full advantage of, but everything in their season,
That would kind of be because, like I said, he's married to Michelle Pfeiffer. He's an American screenwriter. So, like, as a film fan, and plus someone that represents this company, so you'd be like overload, right?
Yeah, that would be great. I'm sure it'll happen one day, in the not too distant future. I look forward to it.
I mean, I'm just looking at stuff that he's known for. I mean, he created Doogie Howser. Picket Fences, Chicago Hope, The Practice, Ally McBeal, Boston Public. I mean, he's like a well-known TV screenwriter.
Oh, yes.
And of course, once again, he's married to Michelle Pfeiffer. Oh my God.
Right.
Seriously?
Can I just say, for her age, she looks really good.
Well, she's famous, You have, people that do stuff for you.
Yeah. So, how can people get involved with the Atlas Society? And I'm sure there's ways, and it doesn't matter what state that they live in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are multiple ways to get involved. We've got a presence on all of the different social media. You can go to atlassociety.org. That's Atlas spelled the normal way, ATLAS, Society, SOCIETY.org. You can find out more about the Atlas Society and all we do. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can see all of our social media. In addition to that, we do have, for those who like reading classic medium, we do have a book club that we do where we'll pick a book and then we'll go through it and read it, and then we'll do like a group discussion on it. It's mostly young people, like college students who are in the group. We do have some really established individuals as well who come in and give different talks and do speeches and stuff with the group. And so yeah, we have a great time. So atlassociety.org would be a great place to get involved, plug in, and join our email list and get updates for what we're doing. Oh, can you hear me? I think your mic muted.
Oh, sorry.
Probably okay though, because you were talking to yourself.
Can you type this into the chat? I'm putting in the chat the link so people can check it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm the one that should not be doing this because I can't see.
You can't see. There, so I put that in the chat so people can see it. Oh, alrighty then. So we talked about entertainment law. We learned a little bit about the Atlas Society.
I'm sorry, I was.
We learned about your love for comics at a young age, and your dad, who's an engineer. My God, like it's like genetics, right?
I am happy, I have no complaints on that front, that's for sure.
I have to say though that it's nice to meet people that are, goal oriented, well-rounded, and part of something that they feel is important to the world. And I think that in light of some of the things that have been happening recently, it's been really difficult for us as teachers to do that. And so it's nice to hear other people reaching out and doing those things as well, because we need, it's very true when we talk about kids being, it takes a village. It really does. And the village doesn't necessarily have to be people that are related to them. It has to be people that are well-meaning and good role models for individuals who don't have a lot of people to look up to. And I mean, that's across gender and class and race and everything.
I mean, looking at Joshua, like, he's gonna be entering law, and then there's gonna be someone looking up and be like, oh, he looks like me. I could get into law.
And I care, so now I care, but I don't know what to do. But this person does, and they're like a vision of yourself. Like, I think it becomes important to have role models that are actively involved, but also like engaged. Representation is important. And so when we look at, when we look at education and when we look at our ability to community outreach, like the best possible way that I know is to put books in the hands of kids that show, that show them that this is what's out there. This is what is available to them. And if they really care about it enough, they can get involved. And, there's a whole host of people that are just as excited to have them. And I think that that's important, and we need to do more of that. I was a little distracted there for a minute because I legitimately just read an article that said that, and I didn't listen to the entire speech, but that said that the sheriff in Texas blamed the teacher. And I'm livid. You don't trust me to pick a library of books for my children that come from all these different places to be represented. We don't want to tell stories about certain people, but you'll blame me when I was being shot in the back. Okay. I'm not okay with that. But I had to sit on my soapbox a little bit.
No, it's okay. I mean, me and Josh are in the same.
There were a lot of tears Tuesday. And when I walked into my classroom and I totally broke down in front of my kids, and I said, why is it a choice that I protect you because you're like my kids, but I don't go home to my own? This is a real thing. And so, yes, we are there for our kids, but we have a community of people that should be there for them too. And so when we do shows like this, where we reach out to people who are involved in, all kinds of things and making amazing things happen, they need to be seeing these people and watching these people and hearing about their trials and tribulations, because we all have them. But to know that these people care and they're there for you. Because I have kids that don't believe anybody gives a, about them outside of, they believe that we don't even care. And the hardest part is that I do. And I put myself in a place where you'll always have a place to be safe in my classroom. Whether I'm hiding you from an active shooter or what, it doesn't matter. I will do that because that's my job. But don't blame people unless you know the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't say, oh, well, it was because, no. You have people with tactical training. They should have done what they needed to do. I don't have tactical training. Let me be specific in my genre of, teaching language arts and choosing books that represent my student population and talking to them about what's happening in those books and about society and life, as opposed to, I don't know, putting a gun in my hand and expecting me to shoot somebody because they're going to shoot my kids. I'm so sorry. I turned it into a thing, but I'm so angry, and I'm so like, where's the community, and where's, Uvalde is only part of it, Columbine, schools in Scotland in 96, this is like 30 years we've been doing this. Why are we doing this for 30 years? Figure it out. And then we blame everybody. It's like, oh, well, it's got to be. It's like, no, we just need to go back to what we were doing before. It does take a village to raise our kids. Our kids need people that are reaching out to them. Let's do what we need to do. They need to see, everybody in a different light. Stereotypes are all they see sometimes.
I think, one of the things that's interesting about this recent case is, when you read this kid's manifesto, it's like 150 pages, but he was radicalized, if you want to use that word, during the COVID lockdowns. It was the COVID lockdowns that he said resulted, he was bored. He was locked at home with nothing else to do. And what did pretty much every young person do? They were online the entire time, on social media the entire time. And that's how he got radicalized. He says so inside of his, his little manifesto. And so, I mean, it's interesting to think, right? There are actions and causes and reactions, not all of which are obvious when the causing action is taking place. But it's weird to think, this kid being on lockdown, like all of us were, but this kid being on lockdown resulted in a whole bunch of kids not being here anymore. And it's just like, one of the things we do need to make sure that we have, things in place where, we can help people who need help. We're recognizing when these kids need help, and we can, create a system around that. I think part of it goes to, training the kids, and, putting something else in their hand where they can learn and grow up to be different people, because the information you learn when you're young does help shape who you become, who you grow up to be. And so getting back to some of the comic books and stuff we were talking about earlier, that's why it's great that you seek to put material inside of these young people's hands, which can, help them learn and help them grow through a medium that they're, more apt to accept and really engage with. So that's another thing that we're trying to do with the Atlas Society, is to have that positive impact through the sort of content that we're putting into the hands of the next generation.
And the beauty of that is having it accessible to them too, like putting it in the hands of parents and teachers and people who feel it important to speak to our kids about these things. Like they can't digest all of the things that are thrown at them without some sort of guidance. And I think a lot of what happened during COVID was that we didn't have guidance. Like we all suffered. And so, at the worst possible point of it, our kids suffered the most because they didn't have other kids, and they didn't even really have parental figures or adult figures in their lives that could handle what was thrown at them as well. And I think that, if we really wanted to get serious about it, we complained a lot about masks, but masks gave us an opportunity to get back out to where we could be a little bit more social again, that we could reach out to people and that they could be there to help us. And I think that was important. We, we're a pretty solid family unit here, but there were times when it was very difficult to be in each other's space all the time. And even despite that, I think that, we managed. I mean, I know we had our own like distractions or whatever, but I think that we were still involved in what our kids were seeing online and what they were seeing on television. And it was never something. Yeah. And I think that if parents are involved in what's happening, and or even people that the kid trusts, it doesn't always have to be your parents. I mean, my mom worked, so my aunt took care of us for quite a while, and my grandparents were involved. And, if all these people are involved, then, you at least have some sort of guidance. Like a lot of us, as adults, we didn't have guidance. We didn't know who to contact because, we struggled. And then if we're struggling, then our kids were struggling. We were lucky.
Right.
We didn't struggle like that, but a lot of people did. And there wasn't a lot of outreach. There wasn't a lot of help. And even, they couldn't go anywhere either. Like the libraries were closed, and things that they would have normally done to get that help wasn't available either. And so it just seemed like a dramatically long time to have that affect us.
Right. And in some cities, they're still locked down in certain cities in America. And so, because we're here in Florida, so things have been opening up, and we're, able to get, we were able to have the event where I got to meet you both. But yeah, some people are still going through, what you're talking about now. yeah, it's really intense, really intense. But yeah, that's why, again, like you were saying, it's great to have, parents and people who the parents can trust to really help with the kids and kind of monitor. Okay, which social media site are you on? what are you reading again? Just to help make sure that children are future adults. We got to make sure that the sort of stuff that they're intaking will help them become the types of adults they should become. And so which again, getting back to the comic book thing is why that's also so important. I'm not sure if Mr. Brian, if you introduced any comics to your kids at an early age, or
Yeah, my oldest, Shane, who turns 20 in September, I introduced him to like all my comics. So like Spider-Man, X-Men, Batman, the Fantastic Four, Daredevil, which is like my go-to Marvel guy.
awesome.
But he also had a lot of really good, other contacts, other things that he did.
I introduced him to pro wrestling too.
And
nice.
his grandfather was a big NASCAR fan, and so they sat and watched a lot of NASCAR together. And he was just very interested in certain things. Plus, his grandfather was in the military, so there was a lot of interest and discussion about military and the way military behaves and the way those things were part of the way he was raised. So
awesome.
he had books of like he fell in love with like military vehicles. So like he can tell you about planes and tanks and guns, Civil War, World War II guns and all that stuff. So
he was very, the difference, I guess, between the generation of the boys is that they had less of their grandfather's influence. But I think that they were also different kids too. And then there were more of them. So as the family grew, it was kind of like they kind of adopted their own interests. Like, I think that they're interested in things that Shane's interested in because Shane's interested in them. And, they talk often and they play games together, but there isn't ever a time when, we're not present. Like we live in a very small place too. So it's not like anybody you can't really hide a lot in 890 square feet. It's like, well, it's like everybody's kind of involved. So it gives.
Yeah, it's a small enough place that we could be surrounded by Funko. I have that many Funkos.
I want to die.
I could fill a room.
This is only part of
nice.
Here. It's insane.
All right,
but
you've got a collection going on.
Much to my demise, but
well, who knows what you might have I don't know if you remember Antiques Roadshow. You might have one of those guys be like, oh, this one's worth this much.
At some point, maybe. It's funny because we both have our own interests too, but he always finds a way to get me involved in everything that he enjoys. I don't know how and I don't know why, but he does.
He loves you. He wants you to be part of it all.
I don't think I needed to be part of this menagerie of Funko, but
she kind of fell in love with with Funko on her own.
Because they had supernatural Funkos, and I have a problem, apparently. But those were the only ones I have.
Right.
Those and my Schitt's Creek ones. They're TV things.
But you do love Stitch.
I do like the Stitch one. I
do. Lilo and Stitch.
There's too many of the other ones that I'm like, oh my God, why would I put all these? But
Experiment 626.
Little fun things.
We do own the Gummy Bears because that was one of her favorite cartoons growing up.
See, all of mine revolve around TV though. So like,
you would be like Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, which I don't even think Funko made, but maybe they will.
Yet, no, I'm sure they will, though.
I wouldn't be surprised if it comes out soon. I would not be surprised. Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think that I don't know if it's because we were older when we had kids that are school aged. I don't know if that is really even a thing anymore, but like we've kind of assimilated them into the things that we enjoyed. And
yeah, I mean, I can tell you, like, you know, my dad introducing us to the comics and the superheroes and things like this. Like, my sisters like superheroes as well. You know, and as they grow up, and like you were saying earlier, you know, we all develop our own, you know, particular taste in things. But they still, I mean, they've watched almost every Marvel movie. You know, they like the cartoons. You know, we watched all the originals, which, like you were saying earlier, Mr. Brian, that's like the peak, that's the pinnacle. But there are also other things that they might not be the peak, but they're also good. You know, like you know, some other Spider-Man series which are really great, and other Batman series which are really good. And
well, I mean, like Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes. I mean, I was already into my like 30s when that came out, but that was a really good Disney cartoon.
The boys have watched that.
Yeah.
They've watched almost everything. So it's just a matter of like, are you involving your kids in the things that you loved and talking to them about what's happening, and then watching what they're watching too. Like, and I know there's a reasonable amount of that. You know, like my mom didn't go to New Kids on the Block concerts with me. I never got to go to one when I was a kid.
So our first one was in 2008.
So in 2008, when they came back, I got to go. But my mom wasn't about to sit and listen to anything like that with me. But I mean, I'll do a certain amount of watching things with them and you know, like listening to them tell me about it, because it's valuable to them, and that's how I value them, is by, you know, sitting and sharing things with them, even if I don't understand a word that came out of their mouth. Like, I have no idea who this character is. I have no idea what they do, but okay.
I think the best way to describe is life's not guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to cherish every single thing, even if it's like something like, I don't like this. Cherish the memory, because you know you're probably, you know, you might not be here tomorrow. You know, anything can happen, as you know, we can see in the news.
Right.
And it's not just at schools. I mean, you could walk into a Walmart or whatever. I mean, it's just life happens. You know, and then and it's not just like shootings and stuff. You know, you could be walking down the street and be like, you know. Life is
hit by a car. Anything can happen.
That's right. And so you cherish every single day, and every day that you wake up is a new day. And that's the way I live my life. I try to stay positive. I message you like every time you're complaining about something. I know. Send her positive things. I'm like, well, I mean, you're here today, right? You know?
Well, and I always think about the positive things too, but you can get, the more negative you let in, and you breathe it in, the more it can, you know, penetrate every part of your life. And so it's whatever.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to, you know, to have that separation, but it's necessary, you know, to kind of smell the roses, see the sunshine, you know, take a walk on the beach, you know, spend some time with the family, you know, exactly.
Meet cool people like you.
I think the nicest part about coming out of COVID and being afforded the opportunities to see people again at conventions and stuff is seeing what's new, because everybody had so much time to be creative and in their own like process, in their own time to kind of find their way through it themselves, that now they're sharing with us. We get to meet people that are talking about their own road. And
we have to kind of thank COVID, because this show came out of COVID.
Yeah, we did. We sat at our kitchen table and we're like, we should do a podcast. And I said, well,
and today we're sitting on episode 83. So
all right, there you go. Woo woo.
Our small viewership, but
you know what? Viewership doesn't matter to me. It's just about hanging out with people like you.
we learned so much cool stuff.
We've had wrestling promoters, we've had actors, we've had comic writers and artists, we've had filmmakers, directors, all that stuff.
I literally don't know what I would do if he wasn't sitting on the panel with me, if he wasn't sitting here with me, because I wouldn't be able to ask questions because like, just tell me more cool stuff. Like, because I get caught up in what people are saying. I'm like, I didn't know that it was involved in that. I was like, oh, wow.
You know, everybody has a story to share. No matter how big or small.
Yes, sir.
You could be from the biggest Hollywood elite to, you know, us. You know, so, everyone has a story to share, and I want to, you know, really thank you for wanting to join us. I would love to have you back just on another episode, just, you know, to talk about whatever.
It would be great to be able to do more with certain, like the books that I had gotten at the convention. I have not had a chance to really dive into them.
But
so I would like to have you back to, you know, talk more about like the Atlas Society over, you know, like how the books kind of translate into the philosophy and the drive, the mission of the group, because I think that you know, we think of individualism as something probably different than everybody has a strange nomenclature for whatever they're trying to say. Right. And I think that's come out of a lot of what's happened in COVID too, is that now we have laws for this and laws for that. Did you really put a law on something by understanding what it was called? Mm-hmm. And you may or may not know what I'm alluding to, but I feel like people don't understand what things in this world really entail if they're not knowledgeable about it. But they don't want to be knowledgeable about it because they don't want to admit that it's a thing.
Yeah. And you know what's really funny is because we've moved so much, it kind of has a connection with the Atlas Society. The main person behind the Atlas Society, I think you actually have a book or something. I saw.
I'm sure I do.
And so it's kind of cool that we're, you know, talking to someone that's involved in the Atlas Society. So Josh, before I sign off here, and I'm going to keep you on the broadcast after we turn off here, but I want to thank you. Where can people find you on social media? If you're on social media, or can they just go to Atlas Society? And
so I'm expect to achieve on pretty much all social media. The word expect, the number 2, and then the word achieve. That's my, you know, Instagram, Twitter, etc. I'm pretty consistent with that. So yeah, if you look that up, and you'll probably find me. So.
All right. So before we ring the bell, as we always do every Saturday, are there any last words that you want to give our viewers? Any words of encouragement or anything? I'll put the balls in your court, man.
Well, first, I'd like to just say thank you for having me on, to both of you. I really enjoyed being here, being a part, and to the audience, thank you all for coming and joining on the podcast and listening to this great conversation. I look forward to coming back, and really had a great time.
All right. So as we always do, we end with ringing the bell, and we'll see everyone next week. Well, actually, tomorrow. Tomorrow we have a special episode at 1:00. So here we go.